I'm Dr. Stephen Schwab. I'm an adjunct assistant professor in the history department. I also teach in the Blunt Undergraduate Initiative and the Honors College. It's my pleasure today to introduce Sam Guggenheimer, who I had as a student a few years ago in a class I teach in the history of strategic intelligence, in which he also did a contract by honors and of course made an A+. Sam, I would say as much as any student I have had here at the University of Alabama, is a person who is constantly creating new challenges for himself and expanding his world. When I first knew him, he was about to start a summer intensive program with the Marine Corps, which didn't work out all that well, but he did it nonetheless. He went on to spend a year as a student in Turkey, where he did not speak the language. He plans now, or hopes, to go back to Turkey to gain a working knowledge of Turkish. And one of the things that Sam has done during his college career is he is always reading challenging books. One of the books that he read and liked a lot was a book by Joseph Campbell called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And Sam was invited to actually teach that class in the Honors College. So it gives me great pleasure to present Sam Guggenheimer.
All right, hello everyone. Dr. Schwab, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you to the Tide Talks team for bringing us all together here tonight. Again, my name is Sam Guggenheimer. A little bit about me. I'm a senior majoring in economics and international studies. I first traveled to Turkey, the subject of my talk tonight, when I was in high school. I spent 2 weeks there traveling the country, and I was able to return for my junior year. I was there for 9 months studying in Istanbul, working towards my degrees and working on my Turkish. Before we dive into exploring this country, 2 things. First, we're just going to scratch the surface here. Unfortunately, in 15 minutes, I can't cover centuries of history as much as I want to. And the second thing is, this presentation is based on my experiences in Turkey. Obviously, as with any place in the world, there are controversies, and I don't want anyone to take this as an endorsement of a particular position or anything like that. But this is my understanding based on what I've experienced there. So the first question, which, if you'll go to the next slide, we have to ask ourselves is, where in the world is Turkey? Where are we? I know that for many of you, when you hear the word Turkey, you think of the bird and Thanksgiving. So, as you can see on the slide, Turkey is, it's on the sort of thumb that comes out of the Middle East. In anthropology and geography textbooks, you'll see that thumb described as Anatolia. That makes up the majority of the country. And fair warning, there are a lot of maps in this presentation. That's probably for 2 reasons. One, understanding the geography of the country and of Istanbul is critical to understanding why it is the way it is today. And 2, I'm just a big fan of maps, so I find them really, really awesome, so I made sure to include a lot of them. So again, without further ado, another map. This is a closer view of Turkey. The red circle is the capital of the country, Ankara. And the blue circle is the location of Istanbul, which will be the sort of focus for the next couple of minutes. So let's start off with the geography. To the north, oops, going a little ahead there. To the north is the Black Sea. Across the Black Sea from Turkey is the Ukraine, Russia, Romania. To the west on land is Bulgaria and Greece. The Aegean Sea to the south, the Mediterranean, as well as Syria, Iraq, Iran, and then to the east, Georgia, Armenia. So when we think of these countries, we often don't put them in the same sort of category. I mean, Greece and Bulgaria are EU nations. Syria right now is in the midst of a very brutal civil war. Iran is in the process of negotiations over its nuclear program. And so Turkey is very much a bridge between these different forces in terms of from a historical perspective, as well as in present day. I mean, it plays an important role in the region politically and culturally. The other thing, though, to remember about Turkey is that, if we could go to the next slide, there we go, is that it's not just a bridge. It's also a home, and it's been a home for people for thousands of years. One of the first known examples of humans living in cities is in Turkey, Çatalhöyük. The Hittites, people mentioned in the Bible, one of their cities, Hattushash, is outside the capital of Turkey, Ankara. So moving through history, the Romans, the Greeks and Romans have left traces in Turkey. The Roman Empire eventually transformed into the Byzantine Empire, and that was the foundation for a lot of what Istanbul is today. Of course, after the Byzantines came the Ottomans, and then modern Turkey finally. So the key to remember here is that throughout all these changes, all sorts of peoples and cultures have not just traveled through this place, but also called it their home. And I've got a few examples up there for you. One that I want to point out is to the east, well, all the way to the right, I guess, is a medieval Armenian city, Ani. So that was once the center of a medieval Armenian empire. So this is a part of the world that has gone through so much change, and that's something that we need to keep in mind as we continue discussing this country, this place. If we could go to there we go. All right, so zooming in on Istanbul, let's focus on the picture to the top first. Two things really have made Istanbul the way it is today. One, as you can probably see, is that it's a really good place to cross from Asia into Europe. It's really that simple. For peoples coming out of the Middle East without the ability to sail long distances, this was a very easy place to ferry across. The other thing that made Istanbul what it is today is that it stands along a very important trade route. To the north, in the Ukraine was for a long time the breadbasket of Europe. And one of the fastest ways to get its products to Europe was through the waterways of the Black Sea, past Istanbul, into the Sea of Marmara, and then finally into the Aegean through what the arrow is pointing at there, the Dardanelles. It's also been called the Hellespont. That's in fact where Xerxes crossed when he was invading the ancient Greeks. So those two things are really, really critical to Istanbul's development. I've got some pictures there of what it looks like in Istanbul as the Bosphorus flows into the Black Sea, and you can see the tankers traveling. It's a very crowded seaway. In the day, you can see the line of tankers waiting to enter. It goes on for miles. So it's a very, very important trade route. The bottom picture is a close-up of the Bosphorus. In Turkish, the Bosphorus is called the Boğaziçi. It comes from the Turkish word boğaz, which means throat. And so it's a pretty apt description of what the Bosphorus looks like. It really is that sort of throat connecting the Black Sea and the Sea of Marmara. I put what it looks like to cross from Asia into Europe and Europe into Asia. And if you ask me to pick something that really got at the soul of what Istanbul is, I would definitely pick the Bosphorus. One of the best ways to relax in Istanbul, a very, very busy place, is to just sit and watch the tankers go by. The Bosphorus is the source of calm and sort of the anchor for this city in the midst of all the hustle and bustle, I guess. All right, so again, another map, like I said. The bottom part of that map shows the entire province of Istanbul. The upper part focuses on the historical core of the city. You'll notice that area is around where the Bosphorus meets the Sea of Marmara. And before we go on, I want to stress here that Istanbul is not a monolithic entity. It's made up of a whole bunch of different neighborhoods, different municipalities, and they really do all have their own feel. It's of course split between the European and the Asian sides. Many people live in Asia and take the ferries every day to work on the European side. So when we're thinking about Istanbul, we really need to take that diversity into account. There are religious sections of the city, conservative sections of the city, and there are very secular sections of the city. And so all of that is present in this one place. In terms of going into the city, oops, a little ahead again. The red arrow is pointing to our first stop. You'll notice it's just a little bit north of the historical core. And then, if we could go to the next slide. Thanks. It's called Taksim Square. And so even though the city has so many hearts and so many souls, this is what I would call the city center. I put a few images of what it's like in Taksim there. During the day, you'll see people shopping. There's a modern shopping mall along the street. There are people selling roasting chestnuts, which I included a picture of there. So it's a really cosmopolitan place. At night, you'll see young Turks out for cocktails, talking until, well, if you're able to stay awake long enough, you'll see them talking until 6 or 7 in the morning. So it's in terms of, I haven't been to every city in the world, but undoubtedly this square and Istiklal Street, the street that runs off it, have to be one of the most metropolitan, cosmopolitan places in the world. Of course, this part of Istanbul hit the news most recently when last summer protests erupted there against the current government of the man on the left. His name is Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And he leads what is termed by the press, anyway, a mildly Islamist political party, the Justice and Development Party. The man on the right is essentially the George Washington of Turkey. He led Turkey in 1923 when it won its independence, and he was a big part of the reason Turkey secularized the way it did. He, for example, instituted a language reform. Turkish was originally written in Arabic, but Arabic letters don't fit the sounds of the Turkish language as well as the Latin alphabet. He instituted that reform. So he also popularized the Western dress, which he was never photographed in anything but the finest attire. It's a sort of a joke over in Turkey, but his eyes were westward. He wanted Turkey to join in that club of nations that we often think of when we think of Europe in the 20th century. When Erdogan was elected on this mildly Islamist platform, there was a lot of concern that he would start to change Turkey in that direction, that some of the things he wanted to do fly in the face of the reforms that the man on the right, Ataturk, wanted to institute. However, in recent months, it's been very interesting in Turkey. Right now, the discussion is not so much the extent to which the extent to which Islam becomes central to society. Instead, it's a lot more about what kind of democracy do the Turks want, and that was a big part of the protest that happened last summer. It wasn't against any particular policy. It was triggered for a particular reason, of course, but it was more about the way that Erdogan is governing currently, and whether or not the bills have just passed that have increased government control of the internet, the independent judiciary there. So that is really a key tension facing modern Turkey. So continuing to move through the city, we'll go down to the historical core of Istanbul. It's a region of Istanbul called Sultanahmet. And the building on the left, the Hagia Sophia, was, for the past 5 years or so, I think the most visited tourist attraction in Turkey. So this is, in many films, or I think Argo had a scene in the Hagia Sophia, or in Turkish, the Hagia Sophia. And so this is really maybe where a lot of tourists, this is what they're coming to see when they come to Istanbul. So a little bit about first the Hagia Sophia on the left there. It was completed in 537 by Justinian I. It's an Eastern Orthodox really cathedral. Inside was decorated with a lot of frescoes, but in 1453, when the Ottomans conquered Istanbul, or Constantinople at that time, they converted it into a mosque, and that's why you see those the medallions, and they plastered over the frescoes. So those have recently been uncovered, and now the Hagia Sophia is a museum. On the right is the Blue Mosque. The Blue Mosque and the Hagia Sophia stand maybe 200 yards apart in Sultanahmet. The Blue Mosque is also called Sultanahmet Mosque. That's because it was built by, you guessed it, Sultan Ahmed I. I think he completed it in around 1616, I believe. And so, because in Islam, the depiction of figures, of human figures in a place of worship is considered idolatrous, the mosque is decorated with really incredible geometric figures, natural figures. They're Arabic scripts with the names of God are around the mosque. It's really, really beautiful. But what I want to stress here before we go on to the next slide is, and it's sort of included in that central picture. These two structures really symbolize, I don't want to say opposites because I don't think that they are opposites, but they are very different cultural and historical traditions. And both of them would be so impressive on their own, but to see them together, 200 yards apart, it's a real reconciliation, I think, in terms of Turkish history. The last place we're going to visit is a little farther west, on the edge of the city. These are the city walls. The city walls were built. These aren't the original city walls. They were built instead a little bit later, the 5th century, by Theodosius II, a Byzantine emperor. And so in the background, you can see the skyscrapers, which rather than being built in the 5th century, were built in the past maybe 2 decades by international financiers. And so I like this picture because to me, it really describes how Turkey is, which is, it's had to develop within this collision between the ancient and the modern. And that's really the context in which Turkey's story is written. And what's the best way to put it? Turkey has had to search for its identity in this sort of context, and that's the lesson that I draw from my experiences there. No University of Alabama event would be complete without a reference to Nick Saban. And so Nick Saban likes to say it's about the process. And that's what Turkey's story really tells us about the search for our own identities, for a country's identity, for an individual's identity. It tells us that it takes time, and it takes work, and there are mistakes made, and there are still problems that the country needs to face. But if the beauty of these monuments and the richness of Turkish culture and the vibrancy and the color of life in Istanbul are any indication, I think that grappling with that search for identity might be the most worthwhile thing in the world. Thank you very much.